At this time, I want to go over a couple of questions on your Chapter 4 worksheet from the step-by-step Chapter 4. Number 19 is the first one that we're going to do, and it says dehydration due to pneumonia. And in this case, I want you to pay special attention to the words due to, which means the patient already had pneumonia and the dehydration came from that. You will need to code both of these because dehydration is not necessarily a symptom of pneumonia, so you'll need to code both. However, you'll want to code the pneumonia code first, simply because the patient had pneumonia first and then it caused dehydration. So if you keep that in mind, that's what happened first, is that the pneumonia has taken place and now the patient is also dehydrated. So pneumonia is going to need to be coded first, and once you look into your ICD-9 manual, you're going to look up pneumonia. And it is important that you know spelling, because if you don't, you'll be looking in the wrong place. But you will need to look up pneumonia. And once you look that up, the code it gives you there is 486. And then we're going to flip to our tabular list and look at code 486. In this particular case, we're not given anything more specific on pneumonia other than just pneumonia. So 486 is the code for pneumonia, organism unspecified, and since we don't have specifics on the organism, that's what code you will use, is 486 for pneumonia. Then we also need to code the dehydration. So if you'll flip back to your alphabetic index here, and you're going to need to look up dehydration. And once you look that up, it gives you code 276.51. Now, I always just look down the list underneath there to make sure there's nothing else we need to be aware of, but here I don't see anything that's going to pertain to dehydration due to pneumonia. So it gives us 276.51. If you'll flip back to your tabular list again and look at that code, it gives us 276.5, and which is volume depletion. And it gives you a red dot there. That means there is an additional digit needed. So if you look underneath there, it gives you the options for the additional digits, and dehydration is 276.51, and that's exactly what we found in the alphabetic list. So your correct answer there is 486 and then 276.51. Okay, the other one I want to look at on this Chapter 4 worksheet is number 20, and this is chronic and acute bronchitis. And this one, anytime you're coding a condition and it's acute and it's also chronic, you always code the acute condition first. The easiest way for me to remember that is an acute condition comes on suddenly, quickly, so you'll want to code that first. You want to be quick to code that one, and then you're going to code the chronic bronchitis after that. The chronic condition lasts longer and it doesn't come on as quickly as an acute condition. So if you can just keep that in your mind and remember, then that way you always code the acute condition first. So in this particular one, chronic and acute bronchitis, the first thing that we need to code is acute bronchitis. So if you'll look up bronchitis in your alphabetic index, and under bronchitis, there is a listing there for acute or subacute, and it gives you 466.0. So if you'll jot that down, 466.0, and while we're here, we're also going to look up the code for the chronic. So for chronic bronchitis, if you look down the list, it gives you 491.9. So jot that down as well, 491.9. So now that we have both of those jotted down, we're going to go to the tabular list and check them. Sometimes it is easier to look up all of the diagnoses in the alphabetic index and jot them down, and then go back to the tabular and look them all up. It's just a matter of preference. However you prefer to do that is fine. But once you get to the tabular list on this, it gives you 466, and it does have a red dot there, which tells you there's an extra digit needed. And right underneath there, we have 466.0. and that is acute bronchitis, which is exactly what our statement says. So the first code you have listed is 466.0. Then we're going to look up the other code that we found, and that is 491.9. And on that one, it gives us 491.9 says unspecified chronic bronchitis. And that is exactly what our statement says. There's no other specifics on that other than just acute and chronic bronchitis. So on this particular one, we're going to have two codes, and we're going to have 466.0 and then 491.9. Those are the correct answers for that one when you're coding acute and chronic conditions.